The Manhattan Masquarade, a tale of love and lies in the Gilded Age. The summer of 1883 brought an oppressive heat to Manhattan that seemed to press down upon the city like a heavy, damp blanket. While the wealthy fled to Newport or Saratoga Springs, those of modest means remained trapped in the sweltering streets, seeking whatever relief they could find in the shade of awnings or the brief respite of an evening breeze off the Hudson River. In a shabby boarding house on the unfashionable end of Washington Square, Violet Ashford sat at the window of her third-floor room, her delicate fingers working steadily at a piece of embroidery that would later be sold to help pay the rent. At 21, she possessed that rare type of beauty that seemed to transcend class distinctions. Dark hair that caught auburn lights in the sun, eyes of such a deep violet gray that they had inspired her name, and features of such refined delicacy that more than one society matron had mistaken her for a lady of breeding on the occasions when she ventured into the better parts of the city. "Violet, my dear, where did you put my cobalt blue?" Her father's querulous voice drifted from the adjoining room that served as his studio. "I cannot possibly continue without it." She set aside her needlework with the patient sigh of one long accustomed to such interruptions. Theodore Ashford was convinced he was destined to be America's greatest painter, a delusion he had maintained for the better part of 20 years, despite producing nothing but canvases that would have made a child's nursery drawings look sophisticated by comparison. "It's on the windowsill where you left it, Papa," she called back, already knowing he wouldn't look there. She rose, smoothing her simple gray dress, one of 3 she owned, this one carefully mended at the elbows and hem, and went to retrieve it for him. The studio was chaos incarnate. Canvases in various stages of completion leaned against every wall, each one a testament to Theodore's complete inability to translate his vision to canvas. His latest effort appeared to be an attempt at depicting Central Park, though it more closely resembled a green puddle surrounded by gray blocks. "Ah, there you are," Theodore exclaimed, snatching the paint tube from her hand without looking up from his work. "I'm capturing the essence of urban paradise, my dear. This shall be my masterpiece." Violet watched him dab energetically at the canvas, adding blue where no blue should reasonably exist in a landscape. She had long ago given up trying to offer suggestions. Her father lived in a world of his own creation, where he was a misunderstood genius rather than a failed artist surviving on his late wife's small inheritance and his daughter's needlework. "Papa," she ventured carefully, "Mrs. Morrison mentioned that the rent cannot art breathe without the constant intrusion of commerce." Theodore interrupted dramatically. The Medicis did not hound Michelangelo about rent. Before Violet could point out that the Medicis had actually paid Michelangelo handsomely, a commotion in the street below drew her attention. A magnificent carriage had stopped outside their boarding house, an unusual sight in this neighborhood. It was painted a deep burgundy with gold trim, pulled by a matched pair of black horses that must have cost more than most people saw in a lifetime. 2 men emerged. The first was young and remarkably handsome, with the kind of athletic build and confident bearing that suggested he had never known a day of want in his life. He wore his expensive clothes with the casual elegance of one born to them. The second man made Violet's heart constrict with immediate sympathy. He was perhaps 30, with a twisted spine that forced him to rely heavily on an ivory-handled cane. His face, though marked by lines of constant pain, possessed a refined intelligence that drew the eye. "Papa, we have visitors," she said, already moving toward the door. "Important ones, by the look of them." Theodore didn't even glance up. "If they're collectors, show them directly to the studio. If they're creditors, we are not at home." Chapter 2. The Duke of Murray Hill. Marcus Pemberton, known to New York society as the wealthiest invalid in America, made his way painfully up the narrow stairs of the boarding house, his cousin William Ashby following with barely concealed impatience. "I still don't understand why we're here, Marcus," William muttered. "Surely if you wanted art, we could visit the galleries on Fifth Avenue." "Patience, cousin," Marcus replied, pausing to catch his breath on the second landing. His condition, the result of a childhood accident when a nursemaid had dropped him, made such climbs torture, but he was determined. "I have heard interesting things about Theodore Ashford. They say he is either a genius or a madman." "They say the same about half the artists in New York," William observed dryly. When they finally reached the 3rd floor, Marcus was unsurprised to find the door already open, held by the most beautiful young woman he had ever seen. His cynical heart, which had long ago decided that all women saw only his money and never the twisted wreck of his body, stuttered momentarily at the expression in her remarkable eyes. It was neither pity nor avarice, but a simple, warm welcome. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice possessing a musical quality that would have graced any drawing room, "I am Violet Ashford. How may we assist you?" "Miss Ashford," Marcus managed to bow despite his condition. "I am Marcus Pemberton, and this is my cousin, Mr. William Ashby. We have come to view your father's work." The flash of surprise in her eyes was quickly masked. "Of course. Please come in. Father is in his studio." She led them through rooms that were clean but shabby, everything worn but meticulously maintained. Marcus noticed the basket of embroidery by the window, the neat row of books on a makeshift shelf, the small touches that suggested someone was trying very hard to maintain dignity in the face of genteel poverty. Theodore Ashford stood before his easel like a general surveying a battlefield, paint smeared across his vest, his thin gray hair standing at odd angles. When he turned to face them, Marcus had to control his expression. The painting was absolutely terrible. "Gentlemen," Theodore exclaimed, "you have come at the perfect moment. I have just completed the final touches on my latest masterpiece. Behold, Summer Afternoon in Central Park." William made a sound that might have been a laugh converted hastily into a cough. Marcus, however, found himself watching Violet's face. She stood slightly behind her father, and he saw the flicker of embarrassment, quickly followed by protective loyalty. "Fascinating technique," Marcus said carefully. "The use of color is certainly unique." "You have an eye for art, sir," Theodore beamed. "So few understand my vision. I eschew the conventional representational approach for something more elemental." "Indeed," Marcus agreed, still watching Violet. She met his gaze, and in that moment he saw that she knew exactly how bad the painting was. There was a plea in her eyes, not for money, but for kindness toward her deluded father. "What would you ask for this piece?" Marcus heard himself saying. Theodore's eyes lit up. "Well, I hadn't considered selling it immediately. I had thought perhaps to exhibit it first." $500, Marcus said quietly. The silence that followed was absolute. William stared at his cousin as if he'd lost his mind. Theodore's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, but it was Violet's reaction that Marcus watched, the color draining from her face, her hand moving to her throat. $500? Theodore managed finally. "If that's acceptable," Marcus said mildly, "I could have my man bring the payment this afternoon." "Acceptable? My dear sir, it is. That is." Theodore seemed incapable of finishing a sentence. "Papa," Violet said quietly, "perhaps you should show Mr. Pemberton your other works as well." As Theodore eagerly began pulling out canvas after canvas, each more terrible than the last, William drew Marcus aside. "Have you completely lost your senses?" he hissed. $500 for that atrocity? Marcus glanced at Violet, who was gently guiding her father's presentation, preventing him from becoming too overwhelming while maintaining his dignity. "Consider it an investment," Marcus murmured. "In what? Terrible art?" "In something far more interesting." Marcus's eyes never left Violet. "Now I have a proposition for you, cousin. How would you like to be me for a while?" William's eyebrows shot up. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me. I want to spend some time here in this neighborhood without the burden of being Marcus Pemberton, the wealthy cripple every fortune-hunting mother in New York wants to catch for her daughter." "That's absurd." "Is it? You're always complaining about being a poor relation. Here's your chance to live like a rich man, at least temporarily." William studied his cousin's face. "This is about the girl." "This is about many things," Marcus replied carefully. "Will you do it or not?" Chapter 3. The Exchange. The plan, such as it was, took shape over the next several days. Marcus took rooms in the boarding house under the name Mr. Temple, claiming to be a scholar researching a book on urban poverty. William, meanwhile, would be introduced as Marcus Pemberton, accompanied by his secretary, Mr. Temple. It was absurd, potentially scandalous, and absolutely irresistible to both men for entirely different reasons. Marcus wanted to observe whether Violet Ashford was genuinely as good and unspoiled as she appeared, or if she would, like every other woman he'd encountered, prove to be motivated by money and position. William, for his part, had his own reasons for agreeing, reasons that had everything to do with mounting gambling debts and the temporary reprieve that access to his cousin's fortune would provide. The first test came sooner than expected. Mrs. Morrison, the boarding house proprietress, was beside herself with excitement at having such distinguished guests. "Mr. Pemberton," she gushed at William, "we are so honored by your presence. I've had the best rooms prepared and—" "Actually," Marcus interrupted smoothly, "Mr. Pemberton requires very specific accommodations due to his constitution. The rooms you've given to me will suit him perfectly." Mrs. Morrison looked confused but adaptable. "Of course, Mr. Temple. Whatever Mr. Pemberton requires." And so the charade began. Chapter 4. The Persistent Suitor. Violet had problems of her own beyond her father's delusions and their precarious financial situation. Chief among these was Samuel Richardson, a man who had risen from clerk to partner in one of Wall Street's most successful firms through sheer determination and an utter inability to accept the word no. He arrived that same afternoon, as he did every Tuesday and Friday, dressed impeccably in a suit that probably cost more than the Ashfords spent in a year. Samuel was not handsome, his features were too harsh, his build too stocky, but he radiated the kind of power that came from never having failed at anything he set his mind to. "Violet," he said, removing his hat as she reluctantly admitted him to their sitting room, "you look lovely, as always." "Mr. Richardson," she replied formally, "I've told you repeatedly that these visits are unnecessary." "Nothing about you is unnecessary to me," he said with an intensity that made her step back. "I've come to renew my offer, and I must renew my refusal." His jaw tightened. "You're being foolish. Your father lives in a fantasy world. You have no money, no prospects, no future without me. I'm offering you everything. A mansion on Fifth Avenue, carriages, jewels, social position." "You're offering me a business arrangement," Violet said quietly. "I become your possession, and in return, I receive material comfort. You make it sound cold, isn't it?" Samuel moved closer, and Violet could smell his cologne, expensive, overwhelming, nothing like the simple soap and sunshine scent that had surrounded the handsome Mr. Ash. "No, Mr. Pemberton," she corrected herself, still confused by the arrangement Mr. Temple had explained. "I love you," Samuel said flatly, as if stating a fact in a business meeting. "I have loved you for 2 years. I am not a man who loves easily or often. You should value that." "I do value it," Violet said carefully, "but I cannot return it." His face darkened. "Cannot? Or will not?" Before she could answer, a knock at the door interrupted them. William Ashby entered, looking every inch the wealthy gentleman he was pretending to be. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said smoothly, though his eyes took in the scene with sharp interest. "Miss Ashford, your father invited me to examine his paintings in better light. I hope I'm not interrupting." Samuel turned to face the newcomer, and Violet saw his expression shift as he took in the expensive clothes, the confident bearing, the unmistakable air of inherited wealth. "Mr. Richardson, may I present Mr. Pemberton?" Violet said, noting how Samuel's eyes sharpened at the name. Everyone in New York knew of the Pemberton fortune. "Pemberton," Samuel said slowly, "I wasn't aware you were acquainted with the Ashfords." William smiled easily. "A recent pleasure. Mr. Ashford's work is quite unique." "If by unique you mean terrible," Samuel said bluntly, "then yes." Violet gasped at the rudeness, but William merely laughed. "A man of direct opinions. I admire that, though I find Mr. Ashford's work fascinating in its unconventional approach." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "And you're staying here? In this boarding house?" "My secretary, Mr. Temple, and I find it refreshing to escape the stuffiness of uptown occasionally. Don't you ever tire of Fifth Avenue's predictability, Mr. Richardson?" "And no, I find Fifth Avenue suits me perfectly." I intend to live there soon with my wife. He looked pointedly at Violet. How fortunate for your future wife, William said mildly, though I've always thought the best marriages are based on mutual affection rather than real estate. The tension in the room was palpable. Samuel stood straighter, his hands clenching. And what would you know of marriage, Mr. Pemberton? The gossip columns suggest you're too busy with actresses and dancers to consider it. William's smile never wavered, but Violet saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. The gossip columns say many things. They also say you've built your fortune on the ruins of others, Mr. Richardson. But surely we shouldn't believe everything we read. Gentlemen, Violet interjected quickly. Perhaps. I should go, Samuel said abruptly. Violet, I will call again on Friday. Consider my offer carefully. Your situation is precarious, and I won't wait forever. He looked at William. Good day, Mr. Pemberton. I trust we'll meet again. I look forward to it, William replied cheerfully. After Samuel left, Violet found herself alone with William. He was different from what she'd expected of the famous Marcus Pemberton, younger, handsomer, more vital. The gossip columns had mentioned his reclusiveness, his bitterness, but this man seemed full of life and charm. I apologize for Mr. Richardson, she began. Don't, William said. He's in love with you. It makes men do foolish things. He's not in love with me, Violet protested. He's in love with the idea of possessing something beautiful. I'm just another acquisition to him. William studied her face. And you? Are you in love with anyone? The question was improperly direct, but something about his manner made it seem natural rather than offensive. I've never had the luxury of thinking about love, she admitted. When one is worried about rent and food, romance seems frivolous. But necessary, William said softly. Without love, what's the point of all the rest? Their eyes met and held for a moment that stretched longer than propriety allowed. Violet felt her heart skip, a sensation she'd never experienced before. This was dangerous, she realized. This man, with his wealth and charm, was exactly the kind of danger she couldn't afford. I should check on my father, she said quickly. Of course, William bowed. Until later, Miss Ashford. As she fled the room, Violet didn't see Marcus watching from the doorway of his own chambers, his expression unreadable as he observed the obvious attraction between his cousin and the woman he was beginning to find increasingly intriguing himself. Chapter 5. The Dance at Delmonico's. 2 weeks into their charade, William had fully embraced his role as Marcus Pemberton. He wore expensive clothes with natural ease, commanded attention in every room, and had already received a dozen invitations from society mothers eager to introduce their daughters. But he found himself spending most of his time at the boarding house, drawn by someone he couldn't quite name. It was Marcus who suggested the outing. There's a private dance at Delmonico's tonight, he said, wincing as he adjusted his position in the chair. His pain had been worse lately, though he tried to hide it. Why don't you take Miss Ashford? It would do her good to escape this place for an evening. William looked at his cousin sharply. Are you testing her or me? Perhaps both, Marcus admitted. Or perhaps I simply think she deserves a night of pleasure. Her life seems to be nothing but caring for that delusional father. William found Violet in the small garden behind the boarding house, reading a worn copy of Tennyson. The late afternoon sun caught the auburn highlights in her dark hair, and for a moment he forgot he was playing a role. Miss Ashford, he said, would you honor me with your company at Delmonico's tonight? She looked up, startled. Delmonico's? I couldn't possibly. Why not? Because I have nothing suitable to wear to such a place. Because I don't belong in that world. Because ... Because you're afraid, he finished gently. Her violet eyes flashed. I'm not afraid of anything. Then prove it. Come with me tonight. She stood, closing her book with a snap. Even if I wanted to, which I don't, I have nothing to wear. That's easily solved. He pulled out a card. Madame Fontaine's on Broadway. Tell her to send the bill to Marcus Pemberton. Choose something in violet to match your eyes. I cannot accept such a gift. It's not a gift. It's a loan. Someday, when your father sells a painting to someone who actually appreciates his unique vision, you can repay me." She laughed despite herself. "That could be never." "Then I'll have the pleasure of knowing you owe me something forever." The words hung between them, charged with meaning neither fully understood. Finally, Violet nodded. "One evening," she agreed, "but only because I've always wanted to see Delmonico's." That night, when Violet descended the boarding house stairs in a gown of deep violet silk that Madame Fontaine had produced as if by magic, William felt his heart stop. She had pinned her hair up, revealing the elegant line of her neck, and her mother's pearl earrings, the only jewelry she owned, caught the gaslight. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "You're supposed to be Marcus Pemberton," she reminded him quietly. "Wealthy, cynical, and unmoved by beauty." "Then Marcus Pemberton is a fool," he replied, offering her his arm. Marcus watched them leave from his window, something twisting in his chest that might have been regret. Chapter 6. The Actress and the Heiress. Delmonico's was ablaze with light and filled with the cream of New York society. William guided Violet through the crowd, noting how heads turned to follow their progress. The men stared at Violet with obvious admiration. The women whispered behind their fans, trying to place this unknown beauty on the arm of the famous Marcus Pemberton. "They're all looking at you," Violet murmured. "They're looking at you," William corrected, "and wondering where I've been hiding you." They had barely taken their seats when two women approached from opposite directions, creating a collision course at their table. The first was Cordelia Van Buren, acknowledged as one of the most beautiful heiresses in New York. Her golden hair was styled in elaborate curls. Her Worth dress reportedly cost more than most people's annual income, and her brown eyes were fixed on William with predatory intensity. The second was Isabella Romano, known professionally as the Nightingale of Broadway. She was dark where Cordelia was fair, voluptuous where the heiress was willowy, and she moved with a sensuality that made men forget their own names. She performed at the Continental Theatre, where she was the undisputed star, commanding fees that rivaled those of European opera singers. "Marcus," Cordelia said sweetly, arriving first by a heartbeat, "how wonderful to see you out in society. You've been absolutely elusive lately." "Miss Van Buren," William replied politely, rising slightly. Isabella arrived, placing a possessive hand on his shoulder. "Marcus, darling, you promised to come see my new show. I've been devastated by your absence." The two women sized each other up like prize fighters, then turned their attention to Violet. "And who is this?" Cordelia asked, her tone suggesting she'd discovered something unpleasant on her shoe. "May I present Miss Violet Ashford," William said. "Miss Ashford, this is Miss Cordelia Van Buren and Miss Isabella Romano." "The artist's daughter," Cordelia said, recognition dawning. "How unusual to see you here." "Marcus has always had eccentric tastes," Isabella added with a laugh that tinkled like broken glass. "Remember when he insisted on attending that dreadful poetry reading in the Bowery?" "I found it quite enlightening," William said coolly, "as I find Miss Ashford's company." Cordelia's eyes narrowed. "How charming! I'm sure Miss Ashford appreciates your charity." Violet's face flushed, but she met Cordelia's gaze steadily. "Mr. Pemberton's kindness to my father has been extraordinary. $500 for a painting is generous indeed." Isabella laughed. "500? Marcus, darling, you spent twice that on champagne at my last opening night party." "Money has different values in different contexts," William said. "Would you ladies excuse us? I promised Miss Ashford a dance." He led Violet onto the dance floor, feeling both women's eyes burning into his back. As they waltzed, he could feel Violet trembling slightly. "I shouldn't have come," she whispered. "I don't belong here." "You belong wherever you choose to be," he said firmly. "Don't let them intimidate you." "That Miss Van Buren, she's in love with you. She's in love with Marcus Pemberton's fortune." And the actress? William's jaw tightened. In truth, William Ashby, not Marcus Pemberton, had been conducting a discreet affair with Isabella for 3 months. It was complicated, passionate, and probably doomed, but he couldn't seem to end it. "She's complicated," he said finally. "She's beautiful," Violet observed. "Beauty isn't everything. Men always say that, but they never mean it." He pulled her closer, perhaps inappropriately so. "I mean it." For the rest of the evening, William was aware of the two women circling like sharks. Cordelia made sure to mention her father's railroads, her house in Newport, her connections to European nobility. Isabella spoke of her admirers, the jewels they'd given her, the Duke who had proposed just last week. Violet said little, but William noticed how she observed everything, the subtle cruelties, the social maneuvering, the way money and power moved through the room like invisible currents. When they finally left, Violet was quiet in the carriage. "You're thinking," William said. "I'm wondering why you really brought me tonight." "What do you mean?" She turned to face him fully. "Mr. Temple told me the truth, that he is Marcus Pemberton and you're his cousin William Ashby. He wanted me to know," he said, "so I could make an informed choice about everything." William felt the blood drain from his face. "When did he tell you this?" 3 days ago. Her voice was steady, but he could see hurt in her eyes. "I've been waiting for you to tell me yourself." Violet "Why the deception, William? Were you testing me? Seeing if I would fall for a wealthy man? Or were you simply amusing yourself with the poor artist's daughter?" "Neither. Marcus wanted. It's complicated. Everything about you seems to be complicated." She looked out the window at the gaslit streets. "I think it would be best if we didn't see each other again." "Violet, please. I saw how those women looked at you tonight. That's your world, William. Mine is a boarding house in Washington Square. We both know how this story ends." When the carriage stopped, she was out before he could help her down, disappearing into the boarding house like a violet shadow. William sat in the darkness, cursing his cousin, himself, and the whole elaborate charade that had just cost him something he was only beginning to realize he couldn't afford to lose. Chapter 7. The Letters. Marcus found his cousin the next morning in a foul temper, pacing the small sitting room like a caged animal. "She knows," William said without preamble. "You told her." "Yes," Marcus replied calmly. "She deserved the truth." "That wasn't your decision to make, wasn't it? It's my identity you've been borrowing, my money you've been spending." Marcus's voice was mild, but there was steel beneath it. "Besides, I was curious to see what she would do with the information. And she's continued to treat me exactly the same. No sudden interest in the real Marcus Pemberton, no attempts to ingratiate herself. Remarkable, really." William slumped into a chair. "She says she doesn't want to see me again." "Can you blame her?" "I was going to tell her." "When? After you'd made her fall in love with you? After you'd ruined her reputation by parading her around Delmonico's?" Marcus's voice sharpened. "I heard about last night. Cordelia Van Buren is already spreading gossip about the nobody who's trying to catch Marcus Pemberton. Cordelia can go to hell." "And Isabella? What about her?" William's silence was telling. Marcus sighed. "You're playing with fire, cousin. Isabella Romano isn't the type to be discarded easily." As if summoned by her name, Mrs. Morrison knocked and entered. "There's a lady to see Mr. Ashby," she said, clearly flustered. She's very insistent." Isabella swept in like a force of nature, dressed in crimson silk that would have been scandalous on anyone else but somehow seemed perfectly natural on her. Her dark eyes went immediately to William, then shifted to Marcus with interest. "So," she said, "the mysterious Mr. Temple. You're not what I expected." "Nor are you, Miss Romano. Marcus replied dryly. She laughed, a rich, genuine sound. I like you. You don't simper like most men. She turned back to William. We need to talk. Privately. Isabella. Now, William. The use of his real name was deliberate, a warning. Marcus rose carefully. I'll give you privacy. No, Isabella said. Stay. You might find this interesting. She pulled a letter from her purse. This came this morning. From you, apparently, William, though I'm confused because you also sent this. She produced a small jewelry box. William went pale. I didn't send you anything. No. Then perhaps you can explain why this letter, clearly in your handwriting, accompanied this rather modest locket with your photograph in it. She opened the locket to reveal William's picture. Not exactly your usual style. When you give gifts, they're usually more substantial. Marcus leaned forward, interested despite himself. May I see the letter? Isabella handed it over. Marcus read it quickly, his expression growing more concerned with each line. William, he said slowly, this mentions choosing something in violet to match your eyes. Isabella's eyes are brown. It wasn't meant for me, Isabella said, her voice dangerously quiet. It was meant for her. That little nobody you were dancing with last night. William grabbed the letter, reading it in growing horror. It was indeed his handwriting, but the words were meant for Violet. An apology, a confession of feelings, a plea for understanding. How it had ended up with Isabella was a mystery, unless... Fleming, he groaned. My valet must have mixed up the packages. Packages? Isabella's voice rose. There was more than one? William's silence was damning. Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, William, you've been a naughty boy, haven't you? Playing at being Marcus, courting that innocent girl, all while keeping me on the side. What would happen, I wonder, if certain people knew the truth about this little charade? You wouldn't, William said. Wouldn't I? You don't know me very well if you think I'll tolerate being made a fool of. She stood, graceful and deadly. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to continue our arrangement. You're going to be seen with me publicly, and you're going to stay away from that Ashford girl. Isabella. Or, she continued as if he hadn't spoken, I'll make sure everyone in New York knows exactly who Marcus Pemberton really is, and how he's been deceiving that poor, innocent girl. Imagine the scandal. Imagine what it would do to her reputation. She moved to the door, then paused. Oh, and William? That diamond necklace you meant to send me? I'll expect it by tomorrow, the real one this time. After she left, the two men sat in silence. Finally, Marcus spoke. What diamond necklace? William buried his face in his hands. I bought her a farewell gift. A diamond pendant. I was ending things with her. And the locket was for Violet? Yes, with a letter explaining everything, apologizing for the deception, telling her how I felt. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You're in love with her. It wasn't a question, but William answered anyway. Yes. And Isabella? Was a mistake. A moment of weakness that turned into months of complications. Marcus struggled to his feet, reaching for his cane. Then we need to fix this. How? Isabella will destroy Violet's reputation if I don't comply. Perhaps. Or perhaps Miss Romano needs to learn that she's not the only one who can play games. Marcus moved toward the door. I'm going to pay a call on Miss Ashford. You're going to stay here and figure out how to extricate yourself from Isabella without destroying an innocent girl in the process. Marcus ... No, cousin. You've made enough of a mess. Let me see what can be salvaged. Chapter 8. Unexpected Allies. Violet was in the garden again when Marcus found her, but this time she was viciously attacking weeds with a determination that suggested she was imagining them to be something, or someone, else. Miss Ashford, he said carefully. She looked up, her face flushed with exertion and what might have been tears. Mr. Pemberton, the real one, I mean. Yes, he said, lowering himself carefully onto a bench. Might we talk? About your cousin? There's nothing to discuss. Actually, I wanted to talk about you. She blinked in surprise. Me? Yes, you're in love with him. The directness of the statement made her drop her trowel. We barely know each other. Time has little to do with love, I've found. Either it strikes or it doesn't, rather like lightning. He smiled sadly. I've never been struck myself, you understand. This body of mine tends to repel rather than attract, but I've observed it in others. Mr. Pemberton quote, Marcus, please. After all, we're conspirators of a sort. You've kept our secret admirably. I haven't told anyone, if that's what you mean. That's not what I mean at all. He studied her face. You've treated me exactly the same since learning the truth. Do you have any idea how remarkable that is? I don't understand. Every other woman of my acquaintance would have immediately transferred their attention to the real fortune. You didn't even blink. Violet sat back on her heels. Is that what this was all about? You were testing me? Initially, yes. I've become rather cynical about women's motivations, I'm afraid. But you've proven me wrong, and that's refreshing. I'm glad I could provide entertainment, she said stiffly. You misunderstand me. I'm trying to apologize, and to explain about William. There's nothing to explain. He's from your world, I'm from mine. Last night made that abundantly clear. Last night you met two of the worst examples of our world, Marcus corrected. Cordelia Van Buren would sell her soul for a title, and Isabella Romano. He paused. What do you know about Isabella? She's beautiful, talented, and obviously involved with William. She's also dangerous, manipulative, and currently blackmailing him. Violet's eyes widened. Blackmailing. Marcus told her about the mixed-up letters, Isabella's threats, the impossible situation. As he spoke, he watched emotions play across Violet's expressive face, hurt, anger, and finally, determination. She can't be allowed to do this, Violet said. I agree. But how to stop her? Violet stood, pacing the small garden. What does she really want? Not William. If she truly loved him, she wouldn't threaten him. Power, Marcus said immediately. Recognition. Acceptance by society. Things that her talent can't buy her. Then give them to her. How? Violet's eyes lit up. You're Marcus Pemberton, the real one. You could change her life with a word, couldn't you? I suppose, but why would I? Because you're not as cynical as you pretend. Because you bought my father's terrible painting out of kindness. Because you want your cousin to be happy. She paused. And because sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to make them an ally. Marcus looked at her with new respect. You're suggesting I bribe her? I'm suggesting you offer her what she really wants in exchange for what we need. It's business, isn't it? And from what I've read, you're very good at business. A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. Miss Ashford, you're rather terrifying. Remind me never to make an enemy of you. Then we'll do it. We'll try. But first, there's something else you should know. Samuel Richardson has been making inquiries about William. He knows something's not right about our arrangement. Violet's face darkened. Samuel doesn't give up easily. Neither do we, Marcus said. Now here's what I propose. Chapter 9. The Confrontation at the Opera. The Metropolitan Opera House was packed for the opening of the new season. Every box was filled with the glittering elite of New York society, jewels catching the gaslight like scattered stars. It was here that Marcus had chosen to stage his confrontation. knowing that whatever happened would be witnessed by everyone who mattered. He had taken a box directly across from the Van Buren families, and he'd made sure word spread that the mysterious Mr. Temple would be attending as the true Marcus Pemberton, accompanied by special guests. The gossip had been burning through society for 3 days. Violet stood before the mirror in her room, wearing another borrowed gown, this one in deep purple silk that made her eyes appear almost luminescent. Her hands trembled as she fastened her mother's pearls. "You don't have to do this," William said from the doorway. She met his eyes in the mirror. "Yes, I do. We all do." "Violet, about the letter." "I know what you meant to write," she said quietly. "Isabella showed me. She wanted me to know exactly what she was keeping from me. And..." She turned to face him. "And it doesn't matter now. After tonight, whatever happens, you'll be free of her. That's what matters." "That's not what matters most," he said, stepping closer. "Violet, Don't," she whispered. "Not yet. Not until this is over. I can't think about us until I know we're free to do so without destroying everyone around us." A knock interrupted them. Marcus entered, looking more formal than either had ever seen him, wearing evening dress that had been specially tailored to minimize his deformity. "It's time," he said simply. They arrived at the opera house to find it in an uproar. The story had spread like wildfire, the false Marcus Pemberton, the deception, the scandal. People didn't know what to believe, and everyone was desperate to see how it would play out. Isabella was already there, holding court in a box she'd somehow procured, wearing a crimson gown that left little to the imagination and diamonds that caught the light like fire. She saw them enter and raised her champagne glass in a mocking toast. Cordelia Van Buren sat with her parents, her face pale with fury. She had been publicly courting Marcus Pemberton for months. To discover he wasn't who she thought was a humiliation she might never recover from. But the biggest surprise was Samuel Richardson, sitting alone in a box nearby, his expression unreadable as he watched them take their seats. Marcus stood, and gradually the opera house fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying despite its usual quietness. "I owe you all an explanation and an apology. For the past several weeks, my cousin, William Ashby, has been presenting himself as me in certain circumstances. This was done at my request, and for my own peculiar reasons." The murmur that ran through the crowd was like the hissing of snakes. "I wanted," Marcus continued, "to observe society without the burden of my name and fortune, to see how people truly are when they don't know they're in the presence of wealth. What I discovered was illuminating." He looked directly at Cordelia. "I discovered that some people value titles above all else, even common decency." His gaze shifted to Isabella. "I discovered that others use their considerable talents for manipulation rather than art." Then he looked at Violet, sitting quietly beside him. "And I discovered that true worth has nothing to do with money or position." "This is ridiculous." Cordelia's father stood up. "You've made fools of us all." "No, sir," Marcus replied calmly. "You've made fools of yourselves. Your daughter has been pursuing me for my fortune, not my person. She never once looked at me, the real me, with anything but disgust. Yet she was prepared to marry that fortune regardless of who carried it." "How dare you?" Cordelia shrieked. "I dare because it's true. Just as it's true that half the young ladies in this opera house would do the same. You've proven my point admirably." "And what about her?" Isabella called out, pointing at Violet. "The nobody you've all been protecting? What makes her so special?" Marcus smiled. "The fact that she knew the truth from nearly the beginning and never once treated me differently. The fact that she fell in love with my cousin when she thought he was a fortune-hunting secretary, not a wealthy heir. The fact that she has more genuine nobility in her little finger than most of you have in your entire beings." "Pretty words," Samuel Richardson said, standing in his box. but they don't change the facts. Miss Ashford and her father are penniless. Your cousin is a gambling wastrel, and you, Mr. Pemberton, are a bitter cripple who's been playing games with people's lives." The opera house gasped at the brutality of his words. It was Violet who stood then, her clear voice cutting through the shocked silence. "You're right, Mr. Richardson. We are poor. William has made mistakes, and Marcus has every right to be bitter. But at least we know who we are. Can you say the same?" "I know exactly who I am," Samuel replied. "I'm the man who's going to marry you." "No," Violet said simply. "You're not." "Because you think this wastrel will offer for you?" Samuel laughed harshly. "With what? He has nothing without his cousin's charity." "Actually," a new voice interrupted from the back of the house, "that's not entirely true." Everyone turned to see Theodore Ashford walking down the aisle, but this was not the scattered, paint-splattered dreamer they knew. He was dressed immaculately, his bearing straight and dignified, his eyes clear and focused. "Papa!" Violet gasped. Theodore climbed the steps to their box with surprising grace. "My dear daughter, I owe you an apology, and all of you an explanation." He turned to face the assembled crowd. "My name is not Theodore Ashford. It is Theodore Ashford Livingston, Earl of Westchester." The silence was absolute. 25 years ago," he continued, "I killed my best friend in a duel over a woman who wasn't worth either of our lives. In my grief and guilt, I renounced my title, my fortune, everything. I swore I would live in penance, creating art that was deliberately terrible, living in poverty, punishing myself for my crime." He looked at Violet, tears streaming down his face. "I condemned my daughter to share my penance. Watching her suffer in poverty, seeing her refuse suitors because she had to care for me, seeing her youth wasted on my selfish guilt. That has been a worse punishment than anything I could have devised." "Papa, no," Violet whispered. "But recently," Theodore continued, "watching my daughter fall in love, seeing the deception and pain surrounding her, I realized my penance had become a vanity. I was so focused on my own guilt that I was destroying the one pure thing in my life, my daughter's happiness." He pulled out a document. "This arrived yesterday from my lawyers in London. My title, my estates, my fortune, all restored. The Queen herself has pardoned my crime, noting that 25 years of self-imposed exile is punishment enough." He turned to Samuel. "Mr. Richardson, my daughter is now Lady Violet Livingston, with a fortune that I suspect exceeds even your wildest ambitions. Do you still wish to marry her?" Samuel's face had gone white. I thought not," Theodore said quietly. "You wanted to possess something beautiful and helpless. A wealthy noblewoman is neither." "This is absurd!" Isabella stood up. "It's another trick, another deception." "Actually," Marcus said, producing a telegram, "I've been in communication with London for the past week, since Mr. Livingston first contacted me. It's all quite true. The Earl of Westchester has returned." Isabella laughed bitterly. "How convenient. How perfectly tidy. The poor girl is suddenly rich. The wastrel can marry her without shame, and everyone lives happily ever after." "Not everyone," Marcus said quietly. "Miss Romano, you have a choice. You can continue your threats and blackmail, in which case I'll ensure you never perform in New York again, or you can accept my offer." "What offer?" "I'm sponsoring a new opera house, one dedicated to American talent, not just European imports. I need a leading lady, someone with the talent and presence to make it succeed. Interested?" Isabella's eyes widened. "You're trying to buy me off." "I'm trying to give you what you really want: legitimacy, respect, a place in society that can't be taken away." "And in return?" "You leave William and Violet alone. You destroy any evidence of our arrangement, and you never speak of it again." Isabella looked around the opera house, seeing the faces turned toward her, some disgusted, some intrigued, all waiting. Then she looked at William, who was holding Violet's hand, their fingers intertwined. You never loved me, she said to William. No, he admitted quietly. I'm sorry. She laughed, but there was less bitterness in it. At least you're honest. Finally, she turned to Marcus. I accept your offer, but I want it in writing. Already done, Marcus said, producing a contract. My lawyers prepared it this morning. As Isabella signed, Cordelia Van Buren stood up. This is disgusting. You're all frauds and liars. No more than you, Miss Van Buren, a new voice said. Everyone turned to see a woman in elegant black enter the box. She was perhaps 40, still beautiful, with eyes that matched Isabella's exactly. Mother, Isabella gasped. Hello, my dear, the woman said. Then she turned to the crowd. Since we're all confessing tonight, perhaps I should add my truth. Isabella is not just my daughter. She's also Cornelius Van Buren's daughter, born before his marriage to the current Mrs. Van Buren, acknowledged in his will and set to inherit half his fortune when she turns 25 next month. Cordelia Van Buren fainted. Her mother screamed. Her father stood frozen, his face purple with rage. The woman in black, Isabella's mother, smiled coldly. I've kept silent for 24 years, Cornelius. But when I heard how your legitimate daughter was treating my Isabella, I decided silence was no longer golden. This is blackmail, Cornelius Van Buren roared. No, the woman replied. It's justice. Isabella is your daughter. You've ignored her, allowed society to treat her as a pariah, while lavishing everything on Cordelia. That ends now. Marcus looked at Isabella with new understanding. You knew? I've always known, she said quietly. Why do you think I wanted so desperately to be accepted? I've been watching my half-sister have everything that should partly be mine. The opera house was in complete chaos now. People were standing, shouting, taking sides. In the midst of it all, Samuel Richardson quietly left his box and disappeared into the night. Marcus raised his cane, banging it on the floor until silence fell. Enough, he said. We came here for opera, not melodrama, though I confess the evening's entertainment has been more dramatic than anything on stage. He looked around the assembled faces. We've all been wearing masks, playing roles. Perhaps it's time we stopped. He turned to William and Violet. You two love each other. Anyone can see that. With her father's blessing and fortune restored, there's no impediment to your marriage. Except, William said quietly, I haven't actually asked her. Everyone turned to look at him. He dropped to one knee, still holding Violet's hand. Violet, Lady Violet, I've lied to you, deceived you, complicated your life beyond measure. I'm a gambler, a wastrel, and probably completely unworthy of you, but I love you with everything in me. Will you marry me anyway? Violet looked down at him, tears streaming down her face. You forgot to mention that you're also kind, loyal, and willing to sacrifice your own happiness for others. She pulled him to his feet. Yes, William. Yes. As they kissed, the opera house erupted, some in applause, some in continued outrage, but Marcus noticed none of it. He was watching Isabella, who stood alone now, her mother having vanished as mysteriously as she'd appeared. Miss Romano, he said quietly, or should I say, Miss Van Buren? Romano, she said firmly. I earned that name. I'll keep it. Would you do me the honor of allowing me to escort you home? She looked at him in surprise. You? But I'm a cripple, yes, but I'm also a man who recognizes strength when he sees it. You've been fighting alone your whole life. Perhaps it's time you had an ally. She studied his face. You're not offering this out of pity. I don't pity you. I admire you. You've survived things that would have broken most people. Including discovering tonight that my half-sister is an insufferable prig? Especially that, Marcus said with a slight smile. Isabella laughed, genuinely this time. You know what, Mr. Pemberton? You're rather interesting yourself. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. but maybe is more than I usually give." As they prepared to leave, Theodore, or rather the Earl of Westchester, approached Marcus. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For buying that terrible painting, for showing me that kindness still existed, for helping me find the courage to stop hiding." "It was an investment," Marcus said. "In what?" Marcus looked at Violet and William, lost in each other's eyes. "In hope, I suppose." Chapter 10. 6 months later. The ballroom of the newly renovated Pemberton Mansion on Fifth Avenue was ablaze with light. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns on the walls, and the cream of New York society mingled with artists, writers, and performers in an unprecedented mixing of worlds. It was Violet and William's wedding reception, and Marcus had insisted on hosting it, transforming his usually somber mansion into a fairyland of flowers and light. Violet, now officially Mrs. William Ashby, stood in her wedding gown, not borrowed this time, but made especially for her by Worth of Paris, a gift from her father. The Earl of Westchester had returned to society with a vengeance, his terrible paintings replaced by the masterworks he was truly capable of creating. His latest exhibition had been the talk of New York, with critics praising his revolutionary honesty and emotional depth. "You look radiant," William whispered in her ear. "I look happy," she corrected. "There's a difference." Across the room, Isabella Romano commanded attention in an emerald gown that complemented her coloring perfectly. She was signing autographs for admirers, her new position as the star of the American Opera House having elevated her to unprecedented respectability. The scandal of her parentage had actually helped. Americans, it turned out, loved a good underdog story. "She looks well," Violet observed. "She looks triumphant," William corrected. "There's a difference." They watched as Marcus approached Isabella, moving carefully through the crowd with his cane. In the months since the Opera House confrontation, an unexpected friendship had developed between the crippled millionaire and the ambitious performer. Some whispered it was more than friendship, but both parties ignored the gossip with magnificent indifference. "Dance with me," Marcus said to Isabella. "You don't dance," she pointed out. "I can sway in place while you do the actual dancing. It's close enough." She laughed and took his arm. "You're impossible." "I've been called worse." As they moved onto the dance floor, Marcus indeed mostly swaying while Isabella gracefully accommodated his limitations, Violet noticed someone standing alone by the windows. Samuel Richardson, uninvited but somehow present anyway, watched the proceedings with an expression she couldn't read. "I should speak to him," she said. "Violet, no," William protested. "He loved me in his way. That deserves acknowledgement, if not return." She crossed the ballroom, noting how conversation stopped as she passed. The story of the Opera House night had become legend, growing more elaborate with each telling. "Samuel," she said quietly. He turned, and she was surprised to see he looked well, better than she'd ever seen him, actually. The harsh lines of his face had softened somehow. "Lady Violet," he said with a slight bow, "or should I say, Mrs. Ashby. Violet will do. We knew each other before titles were involved." "Did we?" "Sometimes I wonder if I knew you at all. You knew what you wanted me to be." "That's not quite the same thing." He was quiet for a moment. "I handled things badly. You handled them as you knew how. We're all products of our experience. Yours didn't make you hard." "It almost did. Poverty can make one desperate, Samuel. I was lucky to have love to keep me soft." "Your father's?" "His, yes, and eventually William's." Samuel looked across the room at William, who was watching them with obvious concern. "He's a lucky man." "We're lucky people. All of us, in our ways." "Even me?" Violet smiled. "I heard about the copper mine. The one you discovered on that land you bought. They say you'll triple your fortune." "Money," Samuel said with surprising bitterness. Yes, I'll have even more of it. And I heard something else about the families you're helping in 5 Points, the children you're sending to school. He colored slightly. Business investments. In children's futures. That's an unusual investment for a hard businessman. Perhaps I'm learning to be something else. Perhaps you are. She extended her hand. I wish you well, Samuel. Truly. He took her hand, held it for a moment, then released it. Be happy, Violet. You deserve it. As she walked away, he called after her. That ring I gave you, do you still have it? She turned back. Yes. Keep it. Not as a reminder of my foolishness, but call it a wedding gift. From an old friend. She nodded and returned to William, who immediately pulled her into his arms. What did he want? To say goodbye properly. Some endings need witnessing. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and William led her onto the floor. As they danced, Violet saw her father in animated conversation with a group of art collectors, his eyes bright with the enthusiasm she remembered from her childhood, but now backed by real talent instead of delusion. She saw Cordelia Van Buren, or rather, Cordelia Hartley now, having married a railroad heir in desperate haste to escape the scandal of her illegitimate half-sister. Cordelia stood stiffly beside her new husband, her face a mask of propriety that fooled no one. She saw Isabella and Marcus still swaying together, lost in conversation that made both of them laugh. Whatever was developing between them, it was real and unexpected and somehow perfect. What are you thinking? William asked. That deception is sometimes the path to truth, that masks sometimes reveal more than faces, that love finds a way, even through lies. Very philosophical for a wedding reception. It's been a philosophical sort of journey. The music changed, and Theodore claimed his daughter for a dance. As Violet moved into her father's arms, she heard him whisper, I'm proud of you, my dear. You saw through all our deceptions to the truth beneath. I learned from the best, she replied. After all, I spent years seeing the masterpiece hidden in your terrible paintings. He laughed, a sound she hadn't heard in years. Perhaps that was my greatest artwork of all, teaching you to look beyond surfaces. Epilogue. 1 year later. The autumn sun filtered through the windows of the cottage in Central Park that William and Violet had made their home. It was modest by Fifth Avenue standards, but perfect for them. Close enough to society to maintain connections, far enough to maintain sanity. Violet sat at her writing desk, working on her memoir. Marcus had convinced her to write it, saying the world needed to hear about the Masquarade from someone who had lived it. The first chapter was already causing a sensation in the literary magazines. William entered, carrying their infant son, Marcus Theodore Ashby, named for the two men who had shaped their destiny. Letter from Marcus, he said, handing her an envelope. She opened it, read quickly, then laughed. He and Isabella are engaged. Finally. What took them so long? Apparently, Isabella wanted to establish her career first. She's just signed a contract to perform in Paris next season. And Marcus? We'll follow her anywhere, he says. He's having a special carriage made to accommodate his condition for European travel. William sat beside her, their son gurgling happily between them. Do you ever miss it? The excitement, the drama. How could I miss it? I'm writing it all down, reliving it daily. She smiled. Besides, we have our own dramas now. Did you hear that Samuel Richardson is courting the Morrison girl, the doctor's daughter, the one who runs the charity hospital? The very same. Apparently, she doesn't care about his money at all, only about what he can do to help her cause. Poor Samuel. Found the one woman in New York who actually doesn't want his fortune. Or perhaps lucky Samuel. He might actually find love this time. A knock at the door interrupted them. William answered it to find a young woman in a worn dress, holding a portfolio. I'm sorry to disturb you, she said nervously, but I heard that Lady Violet, Mrs. Ashby, sometimes helps young artists. My father paints, you see, and we're quite desperate. Violet and William exchanged glances, then Violet smiled. Come in, she said. Let's see what your father has created. But I warn you, I have very particular taste in art. I prefer truth to beauty, honesty to technique. Oh, ma'am, the girl said earnestly, my father's paintings are nothing but honest. Brutally so, some say. Then we'll get along perfectly, Violet said. William, put the kettle on. I have a feeling this is the beginning of another story. As the girl spread out her father's paintings, raw, emotional works that spoke of poverty and struggle and hope, Violet thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a boarding house in Washington Square to a cottage in Central Park, from deception to truth, from loneliness to love. The masquerade was over, but life, real, honest, complicated life, had just begun. Outside, New York City continued its relentless pace, fortunes rising and falling, secrets being kept and revealed, hearts breaking and mending. But inside the cottage, there was tea and conversation, and the promise of new stories yet to be told. The diamond pendant that had caused such confusion, the one meant for Isabella but given to Violet, sat in a glass case on the mantel. Sometimes visitors asked about it, and Violet would tell them the story, each time adding new details, new perspectives, until even she wasn't sure where truth ended and embellishment began. But that, she had learned, was the nature of all stories. They grew in the telling, becoming more than their origins, more than their facts. They became legends, cautionary tales, romances for the ages, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, they became the truth you were meant to live all along. In the end, the Gilded Age of New York had proven one thing above all, that beneath every facade, behind every mask, beyond every deception, the human heart beats with the same desires: love, truth, connection. The Ashfords and Pembertons, the Romanos and Richardsons had all been players in a grand masquerade, but when the music stopped and the masks came off, what remained was simpler and more complex than any of them had imagined. It was just life in all its messy, beautiful, impossible glory, and it was enough.
Are you looking to take your content to the next level? Look no further. I'm KR Monteclaro, and I'm here to bring your vision to life as a versatile video editor and a graphic designer. I have a creative vision and a strong enthusiasm for bringing concepts into life. I can help you stand out in the digital space. Creating captivating stories that capture people is one of my strong suits as a video editor, and I'll make sure that your videos have striking scenes and smooth transitions. And additionally, as a graphic designer, I'll enhance your images into gorgeous artworks and attention-grabbing designs. So let's work together to produce something really unique, whether you're a marketing expert, a content writer, or a business owner. Together, we'll bring your idea to life and leave an impression to your audience that will last. So let's start this journey together by getting in contact with me right now.